All right, welcome back. And, due to popular demand, we've got BK once again. We're doing our Modern Horizons Cube tier list, this time for the Commander cards. And because there are fewer cards, we're also going to talk about, at the end of all this, which of these cards are actually going to make it into Cube. What are we going to start out by trying? So, before we get started, let's take a look at our tier list here. So, we tweaked this a tiny bit, but it's about the same as last time. So, S tier is a Cube All-Star, so the best of the best. A is likely a Cube staple, something very good. B could be good, worth trying, we'll see. C is too niche, needs support. Basically, C's don't have the proper support. D is just too weak, and then F is just even worse than that. No real chance. So let's start with Aggressive Biomancy here. And this is for XX blue-green. You get X tokens that are copies of target creature you control. The you control part's big. And they also each fight an opponent's creature. My biggest problem with this card is it only looks at your side of the board, so you have to have something good in play already and spend a ton of mana and get completely owned by a removal spell if they have it. So I'm skeptical on this one.
Yeah, the clones are so much stronger if you have the upside of when they come into play, they do something if your original target gets removed, and also you get that upside of every once in a while your opponent reanimates an Archon and you get to make an Archon, and the fact that this only hits your own side just kind of puts it below the bar. So that 4 mana mode is like so much worse than other clones we'd be playing with that I don't think the upside of like what happens if you get to fight and do it for a ton of mana makes up for it all.
Yeah, looks like a D. You could put this in your cube if you really wanted to, but I think it's too weak. Angelic Aberrations next. This is 5 and a white for a 4/4 Eldrazi Angel. It's got Devoid, Flying, and Vigilance. And when it enters the battlefield, you sack any number of creatures with base power or toughness 1 or less and make that many 4/4s. This one really needed to cost 5, I think.
Yeah, it's a cool card, but and it would be fun to try to build around in a white token deck, but it's not like you're routinely getting to 6 mana, so I just can't imagine many cube decks, like even a deck with a lot of mana dorks. Like that, maybe a Selesnya deck every once in a while would want to play this, but even then it's gonna have a pretty high fail rate, so pretty out on this one.
Yeah, this one looks actually just like an F to me. I think it's got way too much of an ask for you. Ooh, Barrogoyf. I'm excited about this one. This is 2 and a black for a Tarmogoyf. It's got the same Tarmogoyf stats where it's a 0/1 and gets +1/+1 for each basically card type among all graveyards. So, usually like something between a 3/4 and a 5/6 in the like mid game, sometimes bigger. Early game usually starts at around 2/3 with like lands and sorceries. But it also has Death Touch and Lifelink. So already you're paying 3 mana for a Tarmogoyf with Death Touch and Lifelink, which, I mean, if this is consistently a 4/5, 3 mana 4/5 Death Touch Lifelink is pretty big game. Like you would be pretty happy in most black decks to play that card. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you mill that many cards and you can put a creature card from among them into your hand. So it also draws a card and fills your graveyard when it hits them, which also makes itself bigger. Like, this card is pushed.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, but certainly a lot to like. Like, you compare this card to Preacher or the Schism, which has been a pretty solid card in Cube, and it's like, it takes only, once you get to your second card type, it's already a 2/3, and then it also has Lifelink, and it also kind of, I think, has a better hits ability than Preacher or the Schism's attack ability, and that's just sort of close to the floor. Like, this is a phenomenal card, and one that I see becoming one of the better black creatures in the Cube.
Yeah, this one looks like an easy A to me. I don't know that I'd call it an S tier card, but I think this is going to be very solid for cubes across the different kinds of play patterns. All right, let's take a look at Bismuth Mindrender. 3 and a black for a Devoid Menace 4/3, and when it hits your opponent, when it deals combat damage to a player, they exile cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card, and then you can cast that by paying life equal to its mana value. So it's kind of like Fallen Shinobi, except instead of you ninjaing it in, it's a 4/3 menace for 4. I don't think this is good enough.
No, I mean, you compare it to the last card we just looked at in Barrogoyf, and it feels like this card is just worse despite costing 1 more mana when you compare it a number of different ways. So, yeah,
This
Not
looks
doing
like an
it.
F. It just, you can't pay 4 mana for a card with no ETB that also has to hit them. Like, it's asking a lot. The stats are not there, and the effect isn't either. I like Bloodbraid Challenger though. It says three red green for a 4/3 Cascade haste. So it's a Bloodbraid elf that you paid one more and gave it +1/+1. Though notably with Cascade, paying one more does mean now it can cascade into a 4-drop, which is pretty big. But the exciting part, it has escape of 3 red green, exile 3 cards. So when you escape this from your graveyard, you sure do get the Cascade again. This looks like a pretty nice, like mid-range red-green card that has some cool graveyard synergies. If you self-mill this, you can start escaping it. It can put a lot of power into play. Like if, imagine you play this, hit Bombardiers or Lelia or something like that, and it comes back for more if they wrath you. I like what Bloodbraid Challenger is doing.
Yeah, it's a pretty sweet one. Gruul's sort of mid-range beatdown has been a pretty good sort of deck. You're playing with like cards like Orcish Lumberjack and Lotus Cobra, and you just kind of pop off and you're attacking with big things every turn of the game once you get to like past the first and second turn of the game. And it's easy to fill up your deck with lots of cards that are basically just like good interaction or more good threats. So that's kind of one of the weaknesses of Bloodbraid Elf is and Cascade cards is you could hit the wrong thing at the wrong time. But honestly, when you're playing against those decks, it just feels like their cards are either just like a little bit of acceleration and then mostly just good threats and removal, and Bloodbraid Challenger will hit them all pretty consistently.
Yeah, I like this one. I would start it at B, but I could see room to move up on this. Next up, we've got Copy Land, which is 2 and a blue. It's an enchantment. It does exactly what it says. It copies a land, except it still remains an enchantment. And this, I mean, this is a way to pop Dark Depths. Like you could do things in a various lands deck with it with this, but oh, actually no, this one doesn't even work with Dark Depths because it would enter with the counter. So yeah, this looks pretty marginal to me. I'm not sure if you have it. You think there's something going on here that would make it a little more interesting.
Yeah, we'll just note that you can't really copy Tolarian Academy due to it being legendary. Lotus Field, cute little combo with that, but otherwise, probably just not enough. This is probably more reserved for any kind of cubes where you have like a Locust or a Gates theme, and it could be particularly potent for you to get to have extra copies of those kinds of lands.
All right, I'm going to give it an F, but it does have some amount of build around potential. Disa's funny. So this is 2 and red, green, black, so 2 plus Jund mana for a 5/6. It says whenever a Lorgoyf permanent is put into your graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, put it onto the battlefield. So if you self-mill or discard any Goyf, any Lorgoyf, which after this cube update, there's going to be a couple of the Goyfs in there. Whoa, my camera's going nuts. But it also says whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a Tarmogoyf token, which doesn't really work with the first ability, but it means now if you hit your opponent, you get a Tarmogoyf. I mean, if I compare this to like the Gitrog or most other cards that cost around the same amount of mana, like this just needs too much to go right, I think, to be good enough.
Yeah, I think that's a good assessment. Like, we just don't need our expensive cards to be kind of like that. And while we will have some more Tarmogoyfs, it's not like we're going to be building a deck where we're like looting away a Tarmogoyf on
Yeah.
turn 5 to get it built into value for free. So the whole mix is kind of cool here. It looks like kind of a fun card, but probably not something good enough for our cubes.
Yeah, I give it a D. I think it's got a little bit of potential, but Eldrazi Confluence is 2 colorless for an instant. And like the other confluences, you choose 3 and you can choose the same mode more than once. Give a creature +3/-3 until end of turn. Exile an online permanent, then return it tapped under its owner's control, or create an Eldrazi Scion, so a 1/1 Eldrazi that sacks for a colorless. Mostly this is like kill 2 of their creatures, put a 1/1 into play, which that's not too bad. I think the biggest thing going on here is that you need double colorless to cast it. So that kind of restricts it to one of the cubes that really have a devoid theme or an Eldrazi theme.
Yeah, one of the funky things to me about this card is first of all, it's kind of funny that this card isn't a Kindred instant, which is a new. They're kind of bringing back Tribal, but they're calling it Kindred. The other thing is that it lets you blink non-land permanents, except the Eldrazi largely don't have ETBs. They're way more about cast triggers, so you're not really able to sort of get off any sick combos with that. The best thing, I guess, going for this is that this card can like do one valuable thing and then give you like 2 Scions to ramp to let you cast your big Eldrazi Titan. But that's not really that much value for a 4, to be honest. So I think this is not going to make it.
Yeah, I'm going to say this is a C because I think in an Eldrazi cube or a cube that supports Eldrazi, I definitely think this could be good enough. It just isn't here. Same with this card. Eldritch Immunity costs 1 colorless mana to cast, gives a creature you control pro each color, which is pretty cool. Makes them really hard to block, protects it from almost all spells, all that. And it has overload of 4 and a colorless, so you can kind of use it as a game ender, make all your creatures attack kind of unfettered.
Yeah, I'm somewhat optimistic on this one. It doesn't blow you away, but the fact that you're kind of getting a split card here, where the first card is going to be pretty effective at countering in forms of interaction, with that 1 mana mode, where you just protection from each creature. You know, it does miss colorless forms of interaction, not too many of those, but you will get got by that once in a while with a Walking Ballista. The last ability is particularly cool, though, the Overload ability. The fact that you get to give all of your creatures protection from every color essentially means you get to cast, make basically everything you have unblockable, and assuming they don't have any artifact creatures or Eldrazi lying around. And that mode is like kind of a big game if you ever had a deck, which, you know, we're talking about a lot of things coming together, colorless mana, creatures in play. You probably want to protect them, and then you do maybe want to have some ways of getting through blockers. So all that mix is probably a little bit too disjointed to make this like anything like a staple, but this card is definitely, at least has some powerful applications.
Yeah, I'll give this one a C as well. Like if you're supporting Eldrazi, it could work. It just colorless is a real cost. Exterminator Magmark is 2 red-black for a 5/3. It's an artifact creature, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets only a single non-land permanent opponent controls, if another opponent controls 1 or more non-land permanents, choose one of those permanents. So basically, I think you misread the card, or I did. Both of us, we went over the cards together. This doesn't work in one-on-one. It doesn't even let you double target.
Oh, another opponent. Yeah. All right. Well, you win some, you lose some.
I'm not even putting this in the tier list. It didn't deserve there. It snuck in.
No,
all right.
it doesn't deserve it.
Final act. 4 black for a sorcery. Choose 1 or more. Destroy all creatures. Destroy all planeswalkers. Destroy all battles. Yeah, I remember those. Exile all graveyards. Each opponent loses all counters. So that's energy mostly. Nah, this looks like an F to me. Like, I understand the impetus of like a big sweeper can kill all creatures and planeswalkers, but like missing an artifacts or enchantments is a pretty big bummer. And I think that overall, this is just not a card that is worth 6 mana.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you on all that.
Hideous Taskmaster is 6 in a red for a 7/2 devoid, and when you cast this, for each opponent, gain control of up to 1 target creature that player controls. Untap those creatures. They gain Trample, Haste, and Annihilator 1. This also has Trample, Haste, and Annihilator 1. I mean, this is like the biggest Zealous Conscripts you've ever seen, because first of all, the steal effect is uncounterable. Like when you cast a spell, it just does it. And you get to attack them with a 7/2 Trample Haste plus a big Trample Haster, and they get to sack 2 permanents because you have 2 Annihilator 1s. I think this is pretty cool. I think this would maybe make it if you had Eldrazi be overall. Not that this specifically needs it, just because a 7 mana Eldrazi triggers some of the other Eldrazi stuff, and you probably have more ramp support there. But I think Hideous Taskmaster is cool. The problem is you can't really cheat the ability either because it's not an ETB, so you really do have to cast this. I think it's just a little too pricey.
Yeah, the Annihilator 1 on like a real tempo swing card, it's like you're really hoping you're just going to win the game that turn. And I mean, it does a lot of things, but honestly, when you're like stealing to one of their things and then attacking Annihilator 1, it's not going to make a difference because they're just going to sack 2 of their lands almost every time when that comes up. So yeah, you'll probably just win the game. The Annihilator 1 is mostly fake on this card to me. And while I do appreciate a giant Zealous Conscripts, 7 mana is a lot.
Yeah. Horizon of Progress is a kind of neat land. So it starts out as tap, pay a life, add 1 mana of any type a land you could control could produce. So it's like a reflecting pool that you have to pay a life for. So that's a bit dubious. But it has 3 tap. You can put a land from your hand onto the battlefield tap. So it's like a little ramp card. And you can pay 1 tap and sack it to draw a card. So it's one of the Horizon lands, like you can see by the name. And it basically asks you, how much do you care about 3 tap, put a land in your hand, from your hand into play tapped? And that on a land, that's pretty neat.
Yeah, it's a pretty good 5-color land. It really helps you if you're trying to ever get to double of the same color, which is oftentimes kind of an issue for 5-color decks. the three, it's always so funny when you're looking at these lands with these tap abilities because they secretly are kind of cost one more than you sort of would look at estimate they do. What I mean by that is like you look at this like, okay, this costs three, and it's like, well, what can you do it? Well, when you have four lands, because you're also tapping one of your lands that isn't giving you mana this turn. And once you get to your fourth land and spending four essentially mana to put a land from your hand into play, that's pretty pricey. I'm sure you'll do it once in a while, and I'm sure it'll be helpful, but I think you really got to be in the market for getting like the fixing, or you're playing like a pretty weird like time spirally kind of deck to really want this kind of thing going on.
Yeah, I could see this as like a round to B level card. Like it could be good if you had enough reasons to want it. But I think most cubes are probably not going to want it. Mutated Cultist is a very cool one. This is 2 and a black for a 1/3 devoid death touch. And when you cast it, you remove all counters from up to one target permanent or opponent. So again, it can take all their energy. But mostly, this is about Dark Depths. You play this, you pop your Dark Depths. It's like a Vampire Hexmage, except you're left with a 1/3 devoid. And it also makes the next spell you cast cost 1 less for each counter move this way, though I don't know how often that's really going to come up. I guess you could cast a Walking Ballista for 5 after doing this. So this, I think, very clearly goes into the C category of it needs support, but I am kind of interested in maybe trying out Stage Depths with Mutated Cultist and Hexmage back in, and maybe there's a couple more ways to do that combo, because it is a powerful combo when it works, plus this just eats Planeswalkers straight up.
The Shifting Woodland card from Modern Horizons 3 proper is another good card for Dark Depths. So
Yeah.
definitely some optimistic times for Merit Lage enjoyers. The one other thing I just would note about what this card can do for you is it just kills any Planeswalker, and it is a cast trigger. So, your opponent goes like Teferi Hero of Dominaria, pluses it, they have Memory Lapse up or something like that, and you cast this card, and that it just is going to consistently kill the Teferi. And it doesn't seem, if you ever get to do that or kill a Planeswalker and you've got another land or two, it doesn't seem inconceivable that this could essentially be a ramp spell for you. It's not something you should really plan on because it just can't really do that consistently, but it does a lot, and a 1/3 Death Touch is not the worst fail case for a 3-drop.
Yeah, I mean, if you have 1 mana left over, I could easily see playing like a 4 mana card after you remove 3 counters from, their Dak Faden or what have you. Like, that does seem pretty realistic. So I like Mutated Cultist. I think it's still about a C level card, but I could see it moving up if you put Dark Depths in. Planar Nexus is every non-basic land type taps for a colorless, and you can pay 1 tap and add 1 mana of any color. This is again going to have to be reserved for, are you supporting this in some other way? Because it counts as Urza lands or it counts as locuses. That doesn't really do anything for you right now.
Yeah, it's not the most useful. It looks like it would tap for any color because it gets like every land type, but non-basic land type means it's not getting the ones we enjoy, the forest, swamp, mountain, plains, island.
Pyrogoyf. I love this one. This is 3 in a red. Again, it's a Tarmogoyf, so its power and toughness are equal to the total number of card types plus 1 extra on the toughness. And it says whenever Pyrogoyf or another Luragoyf enters the battlefield under your control, that creature deals damage equal to its power to any target. So, Flame Tongue Kavu is in the cube right now, and is a fine card. Like, I would say I main deck it when I'm playing red 3/4 of the time or so, and side it in pretty frequently, and there's some matchups where it's really excellent. If Pyrogoyf is consistently like a 3/4, it's already pretty comparable because it can hit Planeswalkers, it can hit your opponent, and sometimes this will just be like a 5/6 and just be incredible. And it also, if you put this plus one of the other 3 Lurgoyfs, spoilers, that are going to be in the cube, I mean, this card could really do some work. It's great with clones. Imagine you play this and then Phantasmal Image it, and you get 2 triggers. Like, doesn't that sound awesome?
Yeah, that's really sick. You didn't mention the best upside it has versus Flametongue Kavu.
What's that?
You could play it on an empty board.
Oh, yeah, that's also true. I think the best upside it has versus Flametongue Kavu is it can kill Planeswalkers, probably, but yeah, I mean, this just looks like an A. Like, I don't know that it's like a cube all-star, but like, I would say this is an A. This looks really good to me.
Yeah, I agree. It just looks like better than Flametongue Kavu, and Flametongue Kavu has been a consistent cube card for basically ever.
Yeah, so Pyrogoyf, Rise of the Goyf's coming. Rampant Frogantua. Why did you tackle this one?
All right, we got 2 and a green for a 3/3 creature frog. It's got trample. it's got +10/+10 for each player who has lost the game. So there was a bit of malarkey going on when this card first got previewed because people thought that lost the game meant that when you were in like game 2 of a 3-game match, it's a 13-13 because somebody's lost the game. And then once you get to game 3, it's a 23-23 because by definition, both players have lost the game.
Wow, that sounds sick. Are you going to add it to the cube?
That's not what it does. It doesn't. It just cares about basically who's lost the match. Essentially, that's a commander line of text. All right. So setting aside the nonsense ability for Cube, the last ability is whenever Rampant Gargantua deals combat damage to a player, you may mill that many cards, putting number of land cards among them onto the battlefield tapped.
Wow, that sounds sick if you're hitting for 13.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. So, I guess it could pop and you could attack on turn 4 and you get to put a couple lands into play tapped. But, I mean, we're talking about a 3-mana 3/3. It doesn't do anything the turn it comes into play. 3-mana 3/3 is not that big. And then it's not, and then it could still fizzle on that last ability, but it's mostly about how little it does when it's coming down and the impact and really even the dream I would say it has. Like, you get lands tapped, so it's not the turn you play it you get the mana. It's not the turn you next turn you get the mana. It's the turn at 2 turns after that.
Yeah, I think it was pretty clear F. It's just funny because of I did see a lot of people talking about citing this card in. It's like, nope. This is just here for completion's sake. Satya we talked about during the last review because he snuck in. Looks like a B to us, I think is where we landed, and we're going to be interested in trying it out. Sunken Palace is a land that enters the battlefield tap and taps for a blue. And this is not one of the cycle that untaps if you have an island. It just is always tapped. 1 in a blue and tap it. Exile 7 cards from your graveyard, add a blue. Great deal. But whenever you spend this mana to cast a spell or activate an ability, copy that spell or ability and you can choose new targets. So it's a tap land, but later in the game, you can basically spend 3 mana to get 1 mana. So you're down 2 mana. You're basically spending 2 and casting a spell, and you're getting an extra copy of that spell. That's pretty good, like, to come off of a land.
Yeah, it is. I just honestly just don't really even believe that ability is enough of an upside because you're realistically only going to be able to do it once per game to make up for just having an ETB tapped single color land in your deck. So yeah, I mean, I'm very low on this one.
Way worse than a Shelldock Isle and probably comes online at about the same time. But there is something here. I think Sunken Palace is probably a D. It's probably too weak, but it is kind of an interesting card. Ooh, I do like this one. Talon Gates of Madara. So it's a land. It taps for a colorless. You can pay 1 and tap and add a mana of any color. But when it enters the battlefield, up to 1 target creature phases out. So as a reminder, that basically that creature ceases to exist until their controller's next turn. And then it comes back, but it can attack and it can do all that. It just was kind of like exiled for a turn, but it doesn't retrigger ETBs, any of those things. But then lastly, Talon Gates has another ability. 4 mana. Put Talon Gates from your hand onto the battlefield. So what that means is you can first of all ramp this self-ramps. And it also lets you use it as a combat trick or an instant speed card where they don't know that you have this coming. You could even be under Teferi and you could spend 4, put this into play and phase something out.
Yeah, it's just, there's a lot of sweetness going on with this card. I mean, both of this compares so much better to the other land we saw where you get to spend that mana from your hand. And so that's just a way less of an opportunity cost than putting that other land into play. And the fact that it combines so well with that phase out ability where you're getting it at an instant speed time. And it's not just like Maze-of-Ithing the thing, it's fully phasing it out so any annoying abilities go away. I absolutely love this card.
Yeah, this looks great. I'm gonna give this an A. I think this is gonna be a cube staple. Like, it just looks like a really strong card that does a bunch of different stuff for you. We've got Tarmogoyf Nest. This is a funny one. This is an enchantment, a kindred enchantment, Lurgoyf Aura. You put it on a land, and the land has 1 and a green and tap. Make a Tarmogoyf token. Not good enough, clearly, but it is pretty cute.
Yeah, I mean, we could obviously really pop off with Pyrogoyf with this card, but that's a lot to invest in. Same caveats about giving lands to activated abilities. Like, this is secretly costing you 6 mana to even get the first one, because 3, put it on a land, that land needs to tap, and then 2 more, so that's adding up to way too much, even though it is pretty sweet.
All right, so not the biggest haul. We can take a look at the tier list right here. I've put all the cards here. All right, let's take a look. And here we've got nothing in S tier, 3 A tier cards, 3 B tier cards, 3 C's, and then a bunch of D's and F's, which, for how many cards we're talking about isn't that big of a deal. But what would be really interesting, and we're going to check this out in a second, is how many cards overall are we looking to add to the cube? All right, let's do a quick run through of the cards that we're looking at adding here. Of course, we already talked about these cards. If you want to see what our thoughts are on the reviews, go back to the review preceding this from last week. Or, of course, if it's a commander card, take a look here. So first up, we got a Johnny. A Johnny just looks like too good a value not to want to try. Just you get 2 creatures out of it. If one of them dies, you get a nice little flip planeswalker. Just cool stuff here for White Weenie, I think.
Yeah.
Barrow Goyf we just talked about, and I'm excited to add the Goyf package of Barrow Goyf, Pyrogoyf, and Nether Goyf alongside the already present Tarmogoyf. So Tarmogoyf Tribal is going to be a real thing, or Lure Goyf Tribal. Same with Bloodbraid Challenger. We just talked about this guy, and I think gold slots are competitive, but I might just add one more of each color pair as well if there's enough cool cards. And I think this looks like some good mid-rangey fun. Pyrogoyf, again, just looks excellent. I'm excited to see how that goes. And Satya, Aetherflux Genius. So it's a tricolor card. I'm going to want to try it over Aragorn. You play this, you get to attack immediately, copy something, maybe to keep it around for a little bit. You don't need other energy cards for this to work. And there's a lot of cards that I can imagine copying. Broadside Bombardier is probably the best one. If you go broadside into this, you attack them for 7, and then you can use the copied broadside to throw Satya for 6, and then the original broadside to throw the copy for 5. So that's just right there, 18 damage on turn 4, and you hit for 2 on turn 3. So you don't have to do anything else, and you could just win straight up right there. Talon Gates of Madara looks like a pretty interesting card to add as well. You get to just mess with what your opponent's doing. It's not even the worst on colors, and gets that weird ramp, sort of bouncy, put 4 into play thing. Is there any good way to return this to your hand to get value over and over again?
I mean, there's that 1/3 that we didn't even talk about from the Modern Horizons 3 Commander set. I don't think there's much self-bounce land, but we could bring back Maloku?
yeah, Maloku's been priced out. So we'll try Talon Gates. Felia Exuberant Shepherd looks like it's going to make a pretty big impact too. This card in White Weenie, I've already lost to this in Limited in MH3, and it just played kind of like what we talked about. You play this, you remove blockers, you kill their tokens, you flicker your ETBs. This card just looks like it's going to be awesome.
Strongly agree.
Flare of Denial, I think we both think this is kind of borderline, but I think Flare of Denial can lead to some kind of cool situations, and maybe there's some cheap blue creatures that kind of get higher value because of it.
Yeah, I think one thing that Flare of Denial kind of has going for it is that in our constructed formats, cancel is just like way too bad, whereas in Cube, it's just kind of mostly too bad. So
yeah, the fail case of just casting this for 3 is not the worst. Tamio, though. Tamio looks awesome. Tamio just looks like she's going to be great across multiple formats, and I'm excited to start things out with Tamio, attack twice, play to learn Academy, start getting value from those clues. But it looks like Tamio works in a bunch of different decks.
Yeah.
We've got Crabomination, which I'm a little still disappointed it's not an artifact itself, because I really wanted to Mishra's Workshop this thing out. But it looks pretty fun. Looks like you can do a lot with this. I could even see like a mid-range black deck that has like a Hostile Investigator to sacrifice. Oh, wait, no, sorry. Artifact only. That has a artifact to sacrifice would be good. But mostly just in a black artifact deck that can generate a lot of mana, I could see Crabomination being good enough. Though it is, of course, a 6-mana card. Those do tend to have to do a lot in order to justify their inclusion in Cube. Felder Profane. This is one of the few MDFC cards I actually wanted to try. I don't know if you were interested in trying Sink into Stupor or any of the other ones. This one seemed fine. Black could use a little bit of help, I feel like, every now and then. And I don't really think most of them are quite good enough.
Yeah, Bell's fine. We've kind of seen it before, but this one's slightly better than what was
Hagra-Mauling.
Yes, Hagra-Mauling.
Marionette Apprentice, another card that can kind of support the artifact theme in black. The rate on this is pretty good. Getting a 1/2 and a 1/1 that drains them. Or a 1/2 plus a 1/1, and then 1/1 dies, it drains them, and then this works with your other things. You could also put a counter on this if you really wanted the stats. It looks okay. Not great, but okay. Detectives Phoenix. Collect Evidence 6 isn't that hard in like kind of a chunky red deck. And I've been impressed with how much damage this puts on the board for so little mana. So I'm kind of interested in trying this out. The red has a lot of cards in this kind of vein that make it in and out. So I'm not sure how long it'll last, but I think Detective Phoenix could be okay.
It's got some really sweet moments. The fact that it's also a 1-mana haste granter means that when it gets to the late game, you could do something potentially really strong with it.
Yeah. 6, still good, even after a reread, I would say. And I do want to look forward to playing this. This looks like another card for the Wasteland decks, but also just a really good value card that lets you cast spells out of your graveyard, or permanent spells out of your graveyard, and fuels it with some extra lands. And I know you're excited about the Sowing Mycospawn. What are you hoping to do with this one?
The Sowing Mycospawn is going to get Gaia's Cradle and Tolarian Academy a lot for us, is my prediction. Probably more often Gaia's Cradle, and then once in a while I'll just have a little colorless mana. And you know what? Why don't I blow up one of your lands while I'm at it? And the fact that it's getting the Gaia's Cradle untapped is just so sick. And it's a cast trigger, so even counter spells aren't going to stop it. It's just, this card's ridiculous.
Yeah, it looks really good. So we'll be doing some reaping and some sowing. Our favorite sowing is typically our favorite activity, but every now and then. Speaking of reaping and sowing, my camera is really about to be. It's really sowing here, and it's gonna find out. You can't tell, BK, but having the double camera setup has made my camera just lose it like all the time. So the power level of these cards is too high. Abstruse Appropriation. Follow-up note, as many commenters pointed out, you can only spend colorless mana as any color to cast the card off this, but it means that you just want a couple of colorless sources, or more typically, BK is going to put this in his 5-color deck and just be able to cast whatever he kills anyway.
Exactly. I got all the colors I need. I take the triumphs when they come to me.
Oh yeah, Nadu Winged Wisdom. My biggest hesitance with this card is I think we might get sick of it in other formats, but I think really this is just going to be like a 3/4 flying like value card, like Leovold protecting your card from their stuff, and every now and then you'll have ways to target your own stuff that'll kind of get you net you a profit. And then we've got Flage, Titan of Fire's Fury. I think Red-White could really use this. Like, this is, funnily enough, also not as good in, like, a Red-White aggro deck as, like, a Jeskai control deck. So that part I'm certainly looking forward to. And I think the amount of, like, rewards for self-mill has gotten pretty high, even though this isn't in the colors that typically does that quite as well. I just think there's something here, and I really like Uro. And this looks, comparable at least to Uro in terms of what it's offering.
Yeah, it does a lot, and it just gives you good value when you've got it coming down and just getting a Lightning Helix early, and then in the late game, it just really is going to take over, like we've seen from those cards. And Red-White's a great color combination for playing lots of cards cheap to fill it up for escape, so this could definitely get there.
And of course, Psychic Frog, our pick for the best card overall from this set. Just a Reanimator enabler, a big threat in and of itself, great with Luris, like what they're not to love. And I think Psychic Frog is gonna really deliver. So we'll see if it lives up to the hype, but it's definitely gonna get its shot to do so. Shifting Woodlands, another one you mentioned, in order to support depths decks where you can turn this into Dark Depths in your graveyard, and it makes a 20/20 immediately. Good with Crucible and Ren and 6 type cards. And it's also like a pretty low opportunity cost if it enters untapped most of the time, that sometimes it can just turn into a random thing and do something for you.
Yeah, sweet combos, and also just good, clean fun, really.
Invert Polarity is definitely something. I mean, you'll win or lose a game based on a coin flip, but I think this card's clearly good enough, and I bet it'll lead to some kind of fun scenarios, even though I know a coin flip is not always how you want to end a game. When your opponent casts a Shieldred on turn 4 and you have this card, like, yeah, you're either happy or you're really happy. And then Nether Goyf to support the Goyf theme, but also I think this card stands on its own. If you mill it or discard it, you can bring it back. It's not quite as big as the other Goyfs because this one only looks at your own graveyard, just because otherwise I think the escape would be too free. But I still think this card could do something. And I know you're not going to like this one, but Ghostfire Slice, it's just an efficient burn spell. I don't think like it's too far out to want to play 3 mana deal 4, but this is colorless, and most importantly, it's only 1 mana to cast if they have a multicolored permanent. So if they play a Planeswalker or an Omnath or something, you can just play this for 1 mana. That seems pretty good.
Yeah, whatever, not for me.
I know. Emperor of Bones, though, this one looks fun too. When you adapt this, it gets to corpse dance something from a graveyard. It also is kind of graveyard hate as it sits in play. And if you can get counters on this some other way, it does keep triggering. So I think Emperor of Bones is going to be pretty sweet in kind of fair decks, but also potentially good as just another reanimation type spell in an unfair deck. Like you could use this for 4 mana to basically, shallow grave your Atraxa or what have you.
I'm into it. I mean, it doesn't work with the Eldrazi is the biggest annoyance, but it does a lot.
Yeah.
For not that much mana.
Fanatic of Ronus is 2 mana, 1/4 taps for a green, but as long as you have a big creature taps for 4 green, and this last ability is why it gets it over the line, you can eternalize it. You cast it from your graveyard as a 4/4 effectively, which then means it taps for 4 green. I think that there's some kind of a lot of different 2 mana accelerants you can play, and this one just looks like one that's worth trying that might wash out, but who knows, it might stick around.
There's just ways, even in like your normal, like if you play this card in a red-green deck, like you've maybe got some discard outlets to get rid of it and get value with it, like Fable the Mirror Breaker, and then you just have something like an Ubenwald oddity that uses those tons of mana so well. So this card can really pop, and it just doesn't. There's no part of this is really costed very high. I mean, 2 mana 1/4 tap for green isn't the best, right?
Yeah, but certainly not terrible. And then lastly, we have Vexing Bauble, which counters free spells and is good with Urza's Saga, good with Children Academy. Little cantrippy card. It's like Soul Guide Lantern. It's not going to make a big impact most of the time, but every now and then, you'll be pretty glad you had it. So that wraps up our Modern Horizons Cube tier list here. Today's episode was, of course, a lot shorter than last week's just because the Commander set had a lot fewer gems, though we did manage to include a card that only works in Commander, so, well done us. As always, I appreciate you hanging out and watching our videos. And, like I said, the people have spoken. BK, they do seem to like you. And we'll try to figure out more ways to incorporate everyone's favorite, not Brian Kibler, not Brian Kebley, not Brian Kelly, rather, not Brian Cole, Andrew Beckstrom here. But you know what? There's a lot of BKs. That's all I'm going to say. So that'll do it for today. As always, I appreciate you hanging out with us, me and BK. And I'll be back tomorrow with a cube draft. I'll see you then. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. It helps out the channel and you won't miss a single draft.